Iran had been preparing for exactly this moment for decades. While the world was watching its nuclear program, its proxy militias, its rhetoric from the pulpit of the United Nations, Tehran was quietly building something else entirely. A vast layered asymmetric war machine. Missiles stacked in underground silos. Swarms of drones assembled in warehouses hidden from satellite imagery. Kamikaze speedboats, underwater drones, and a single devastating strategic idea. If war ever came, Iran would not fight it on a battlefield. It would fight it at sea. It would close the Strait of Hormuz. It would choke the world's oil supply and force every major power to come to the table on Tehran's terms. On February 28, 2026, that plan was finally put to the test. Following coordinated US and Israeli strikes on Iranian military infrastructure, the Islamic Republic retaliated with everything it had, and the world held its breath. What has unfolded over the past 5 weeks is not just a military conflict. It is a live-fire stress test of the entire post-Cold War defense architecture in the Middle East. So today we are breaking it down, all of it. The Iranian siege strategy, the Saudi F-35 breakthrough, Ukraine's stunning entry into this theater, the South Korean shield rising over the UAE, and the three-front squeeze Iran is trying to pull off while the clock ticks on its last remaining trump cards. Let us start with the plan Iran had been building toward for 30 years. Iran's defense doctrine was never designed to match the United States in a straight fight. That was never the point. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps studied American military power carefully and concluded that the right answer was not symmetry. It was asymmetry. Multiply the number of threats. Keep the cost per threat low. Force the enemy to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars intercepting weapons that cost hundreds. Saturate the defense layers until something gets through. And most critically, hold the Strait of Hormuz as the ultimate hostage. The Strait of Hormuz is the narrowest navigable passage connecting the Persian Gulf to the Indian Ocean. At its narrowest point, it is just 33 kilometers wide. Every day, under normal conditions, approximately 20% of the world's daily oil supply transits through that corridor. 19% of all liquefied natural gas shipments worldwide pass through those waters. According to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, roughly 21 million barrels of oil per day flow through the strait. It is the single most important maritime choke point on the planet, and Iran sits on its northern shore. For years, the Iranian naval forces had been seeding those waters with tactics designed to close that passage in a crisis. Stealthy mines deployable from civilian vessels. Kamikaze speedboats that can reach attack speed before radar-guided weapons can engage them. A growing fleet of underwater drones capable of conducting reconnaissance and sabotage missions without surfacing. And swarms of cheap aerial drones to overwhelm and distract defensive systems while the real threats close in from below and at sea level. The vision was simple and brutal. In the event of a war with the United States or Israel, Iran would simultaneously target Gulf capitals with ballistic missiles and drones, drawing their air defense systems into a war of attrition. And while those systems burned through their interceptor stockpiles, Iranian naval units would move to lock down the strait. The combined shock would, in Tehran's calculation, force oil prices to spike catastrophically, threaten the economic stability of every Gulf monarchy, and compel a ceasefire before American military power could fully overwhelm Iranian forces. What Tehran did not fully account for was how ready its targets had become. In the opening weeks of the conflict, as Iranian missiles and drones began arriving over Gulf capitals, the defense networks of Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Bahrain, Qatar, and Kuwait performed at levels that genuinely surprised outside analysts. According to data released by the UAE Ministry of Defense, as of April 1, 2026, Iranian forces had fired a total of 438 ballistic missiles, over 2,000 drones, and 19 cruise missiles at targets in the UAE alone. Of those, the vast majority were intercepted. The overall interception rate for ballistic missiles held above 90% in the initial phase of the conflict. A remarkable achievement for any air defense network operating under sustained mass attack conditions. But the Gulf states knew that sustainable defense was not the same as ultimate victory. Interceptors are finite. Missiles burn through stockpiles. And Iran had been producing drones and ballistic missiles faster than the Gulf could replace the interceptors it was expending. The attrition mathematics were not favorable over a long timeline. Something had to change. And change it did, from 3 unexpected directions simultaneously. On March 26, 2026, the Ukrainian president made an unannounced visit to Saudi Arabia. Days earlier, he had already confirmed publicly that Ukrainian officials were actively helping 5 countries in the region counter Iranian drone attacks. Those countries were the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Kuwait, and Jordan. As the president put it publicly, Ukrainian teams were already working with those nations on countering Iranian drones, providing expert assessments and helping build defense systems. But the Riyadh visit went further. On March 27th, as confirmed by Ukraine's defense ministry, Ukraine signed a full defense cooperation agreement with Saudi Arabia, a 10-year partnership worth multiple billions of dollars, covering not just technology transfer, but co-production, joint manufacturing, software integration, electronic warfare systems, and most critically, maritime drone technology. On March 30th, the Ukrainian president formalized similar agreements with Qatar during a stop in Doha, meeting with Qatar's leadership. Maritime drones were explicitly included in the deals struck with Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Qatar. Not just interceptors alone, but also defense lines, software, and electronic warfare systems. Ukraine was taking a systemic approach to the problem. Think about what this means for a moment. Ukraine is a country that has been under relentless Russian assault for over 4 years. It has absorbed hypersonic missiles, saturation drone raids, and every tool of modern air warfare Russia could throw at it. And it has not only survived, it has innovated. It has built one of the most battle-tested, cost-effective counter-drone architectures on the planet, and now it is deploying that architecture in the Persian Gulf. According to analysis published in late March 2026, Ukrainian interceptor drones can be produced for between $800 and $3,000 per unit. Compare that to tens of thousands of dollars for an Iranian Shahed-type drone or several $1,000,000 for a Patriot PAC-3 interceptor. Ukraine has demonstrated in the Black Sea and over its own skies that 2 to 3 of its interceptors, costing under $10,000 in total, are typically sufficient to destroy a single incoming drone. As the Ukrainian president stated, Ukraine is now capable of supplying up to 1,000 interceptor drones per day to international partners. As of the time of reporting, over 200 Ukrainian military specialists are confirmed deployed across the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar, with additional teams en route to Kuwait. These are not advisors sitting in conference rooms. These are combat-tested crews who have been shooting down Russian and Iranian-designed drones for years. They are teaching Gulf defense teams their methods in real time under fire. But the Ukrainian contribution extends beyond the air. It is what Kyiv is proposing for the sea that is the most strategically significant development in the Hormuz crisis. Ukraine's naval drone program emerged from necessity. When Russia's Black Sea Fleet moved to dominate Ukraine's coastline in early 2022, Kyiv had no surface navy capable of challenging it directly. So it built something else. Unmanned surface vehicles, remote-operated, AI-assisted, capable of high-speed attack runs in shallow and open water alike. Systems that can reach speeds exceeding 50 knots and carry significant explosive payloads, with operational ranges exceeding 1,000 kilometers. The results in the Black Sea were staggering. Ukrainian naval drones have sunk Russian patrol vessels, landing ships, and even contributed to damaging major surface combatants. They played a direct role in forcing the Russian Black Sea Fleet to effectively abandon its forward operating posture in Crimean waters. They helped unblock the Black Sea grain corridor, allowing Ukrainian agricultural exports to resume for a critical period. Now, the Ukrainian leadership is proposing to apply those exact principles to the Strait of Hormuz. The strategic logic is precise. Iran's naval strategy in the Strait relies on low-cost, high-volume asymmetric threats, mines, kamikaze speedboats, and submarine drones operating in the shallow, cluttered waters near the Iranian coastline and around strategic choke points. These threats are difficult for large surface ships to counter at close range. They are designed to overwhelm conventional naval patrol operations. Ukrainian unmanned surface vehicles change that equation entirely. A single unmanned boat can intercept and destroy an Iranian kamikaze skiff before it reaches attack range at a fraction of the cost of deploying a frigate or destroyer. Another drone can patrol the approaches to the strait around the clock, detecting mine-laying operations and neutralizing them at range. And because these systems are unmanned, Iran loses the political leverage of threatening to sink crewed vessels and take sailors hostage, a tactic Tehran has used repeatedly over the past 2 decades. Arab leaders understand that Ukrainian armed forces have been very successful in unblocking the Black Sea corridor. They know that they can count on Ukrainian expertise in this area. Under the framework of the new agreements, Ukraine and its Gulf partners will establish joint manufacturing lines for naval drones, interceptor drones, and electronic warfare systems, both within Ukraine and in partner countries across the region. This is not a technology sale. It is a technology ecosystem. It means Gulf states will eventually be able to produce and maintain these systems domestically, removing the supply chain vulnerabilities that come with dependence on a single foreign supplier during a crisis. For Ukraine itself, the deal carries enormous strategic value beyond the financial returns. In exchange for its maritime and counter-drone expertise, Kyiv has secured commitments from Gulf nations for energy cooperation and critical air defense munitions. Ukraine is seeking high-end air defense missiles that Gulf states possess, and that Kyiv urgently needs to counter Russia's continuing strikes on Ukrainian infrastructure. The country fighting for survival on one front is simultaneously becoming a defense exporter, reshaping the balance on another. That is one of the more remarkable geopolitical turns of the 21st century so far. Now, while Ukraine is reshaping the maritime and low-altitude battlefield, Saudi Arabia is undergoing the single most significant transformation of its aerial combat capability in a generation. On March 28, 2026, speaking at a major investment summit, the U.S. president addressed the room on the subject of the U.S.-Saudi relationship. For the very first time, he said that the United States had agreed to sell Saudi Arabia perhaps the most capable fighter jet ever built, the F-35. It was not the first time the president had made this declaration. He had originally announced the sale intent back in November 2025 during a visit to the White House, when the administration formally designated Saudi Arabia a major non-NATO ally and embedded an F-35 commitment inside a broader U.S.-Saudi strategic defense agreement. But the March 28th statement was significant because it came as the war was actively unfolding in the Gulf, lending the announcement an entirely different urgency. According to multiple defense publications, Saudi Arabia has requested up to 48 F-35A aircraft, equivalent to roughly 2 full operational squadrons, including initial spare parts and engines. The deal is estimated to be worth between $5.3 and $5.7 billion, not including munitions or long-term logistics support. The F-35A is the conventional takeoff and landing variant used by the majority of U.S. allies currently operating the platform. If and when this sale is fully formalized and implemented, Saudi Arabia will become the second country in the Middle East after Israel to operate the F-35. That is a historic shift. For decades, the United States maintained a policy of carefully managing the transfer of advanced combat aircraft to Arab states in order to preserve what Washington calls Israel's qualitative military edge. That restraint has been effectively overridden in the context of the current conflict. In practical military terms, the F-35 Lightning II is a fifth-generation multi-role stealth fighter. Its defining characteristics are not just speed or firepower, but information dominance and survivability. The aircraft integrates an advanced sensor fusion system, combining data from multiple onboard sensors and external networks into a single comprehensive picture of the battle space. Its low radar cross-section makes it extraordinarily difficult for surface-based and airborne radars to detect at operational ranges. And its advanced radar can simultaneously track dozens of targets while sharing that data in real time with allied platforms. For Saudi Arabia facing Iran's drone swarm tactics, this combination represents a fundamental shift in how it can prosecute both defense and offense. Under the current architecture, when Iran launches a large-scale drone attack, Saudi ground-based radar systems must detect and track hundreds of small, low-altitude targets simultaneously. The drones are deliberately designed to be difficult to detect early, flying at low altitudes and varying their signatures. By the time a significant swarm is confirmed, the window for engagement is compressed. Ground batteries fire, interceptors are expended, and the attrition continues. An F-35 operating in the battle space changes the engagement geometry entirely. Its sensor suite can detect incoming drone swarms at significantly greater distances than ground radars, giving defense commanders a much longer engagement window. It can pass precise targeting data to ground-based Patriot batteries and short-range interceptor systems within milliseconds, unifying the entire defensive network under a single coherent picture. And because it can locate the origin points of drone launches and missile salvos, it opens the door to counter-strike operations against the Iranian launch infrastructure itself. The deterrent logic matters enormously here. Iran's drone and missile campaign has operated on the assumption that it can continue launching from protected bases inside Iranian territory without facing direct retaliation. The F-35 changes that calculus. With its stealth profile and long-range precision strike capability, a Saudi F-35 fleet can penetrate Iranian air defenses and strike launch facilities, command centers, and coastal defense batteries that would otherwise be considered sanctuary targets. That assumption disappears the moment operational F-35s enter the Saudi order of battle. The deterrence equation shifts from reactive interception to proactive suppression. Saudi Arabia's existing air force includes fourth-generation platforms that are formidable, but lack the sensor integration and survivability of the F-35. When the F-35s arrive, they will not replace these aircraft. They will act as the airborne intelligence layer above them. An F-35 in the air becomes the eyes and brain of the entire fleet, transmitting real-time targeting data to fourth-generation jets flying alongside it, multiplying the effectiveness of the entire force exponentially. Iran's air force, by contrast, has been functionally neutralized. Decades of sanctions, maintenance failures, and the destruction wrought by strikes in the opening phases of this conflict have left only a fraction of Iran's original fleet airworthy. That means Iran's only remaining offensive air tool is unmanned: drones. And the F-35 is specifically optimized to detect and engage drone threats at distances that current Saudi air defense architecture cannot match. For now, the critical defense infrastructure protecting Saudi Arabia remains heavily dependent on U.S. forces stationed in the kingdom. Approximately 3,000 to 4,000 U.S. troops are currently deployed in Saudi Arabia, with advanced Patriot batteries protecting key oil processing facilities that handle between 5 and 7% of global daily oil production and the largest oil export port in the world. U.S. surveillance aircraft operate continuously from a major air base. A joint U.S.-Saudi Air Defense Command Center operates around the clock in Riyadh. These assets form the first line of protection while the broader strategic transformation unfolds. And while the skies above Saudi Arabia are being transformed, a quiet revolution is taking place underground. With the Strait of Hormuz effectively contested, Saudi Arabia activated its east-west pipeline to full capacity for the first time in its 45-year history. This 1,200-kilometer pipeline pumps oil directly from the Persian Gulf fields across the Saudi desert to a port on the Red Sea. According to official communications, it is now moving 7 million barrels of oil per day, a daily record. This is the largest energy bypass route for the Strait of Hormuz in existence, and its activation is the Saudis' most powerful economic counter to Iran's blockade strategy. But activating the pipeline creates its own vulnerabilities. It stretches across desert terrain, passing through dozens of potentially exposed locations. And the Red Sea port now faces a new threat vector. On March 28, 2026, the Houthis officially declared that they had entered the conflict on Iran's side. The Bab el-Mandeb Strait, the entrance to the Red Sea from the south, has come under fire again. Saudi Arabia's southwestern coast is just 150 kilometers from this point. The Houthi declaration does not just reopen the Red Sea front. It threatens the entire alternative energy corridor that Riyadh constructed as a hedge against Hormuz's closure. The F-35s, the layered missile defense, the U.S. military presence are not just protecting the capital. They are protecting the pipeline, the port, and the bypass route that is keeping oil flowing to the global market. Now let us turn to the UAE, because what has happened there over the past 5 weeks deserves its own detailed examination. Of all the Gulf states targeted by Iran in this conflict, the UAE has absorbed the heaviest volume of attacks by a significant margin. According to conflict data updated through April 1, 2026, Iranian forces have fired 438 ballistic missiles, over 2,000 drone attacks, and 19 cruise missiles at targets in the UAE. The UAE has faced this disproportionate bombardment in part because Iran views it as the Gulf state most strategically aligned with the United States and through the Abraham Accords with Israel. Iran is targeting not just military bases, but Dubai's identity. The UAE has built a model based on tourism, finance, technology, and logistics. Striking that model sends a message. Iran wants to damage Dubai's reputation as a safe global hub. Despite the intensity, the UAE's layered defense network has held. In the first 10 days of the conflict, the UAE Ministry of Defense reported that over 1,400 unmanned aerial vehicles had been detected, of which over 1,300 were intercepted. The overall interception rate for ballistic missiles stayed above 90% throughout the conflict. These numbers represent one of the most intense sustained air defense campaigns in the modern history of missile warfare. And central to that performance has been a weapon that almost nobody in the Western press was talking about before this conflict began: South Korea's Cheongung II medium-range surface-to-air missile system. In January 2022, the UAE signed a contract with South Korean defense firms for 10 batteries of the Cheongung II system valued at approximately $3.5 billion. The first batteries arrived in the UAE in May 2025. When Iran's missiles started flying at the end of February, those batteries went straight into combat, and their performance was extraordinary. The Cheongung II achieved an overall interception rate of approximately 96% against Iranian ballistic missiles in one major engagement sequence. To put that in context, in a recent large-scale complex attack situation involving numerous drones and irregular maneuverable ballistic missiles, it is hard to find a case where the overall interception rate exceeded 90%. The Cheongung II did it in combat on its first deployment. Iran's strategy worked when it was fighting individual defense systems. It begins to break down when it is fighting a network. There is one final data point that underscores the strategic dead end Iran is approaching. As of this moment, its conventional air force is functionally non-existent as an operational strike force. Its long-range precision missile inventory is being expended at a rate that will become unsustainable. Its drone production, while significant, is now facing a counter-drone ecosystem in the Gulf that was trained in the actual fire of the Russia-Ukraine war. And the one lever it still holds, the Strait of Hormuz, is about to face maritime drone systems specifically designed by people who use them to break open a similar blockade in the Black Sea. The question of how this crisis resolves ultimately depends on whether Iran's leadership chooses a negotiated exit before the military cards run out entirely, or whether it continues to the point where its strategic deterrent in the Gulf is permanently degraded. Mediation channels suggest that an off-ramp exists. Whether Tehran takes it is the critical unknown. What is already certain is that this conflict has permanently altered the defense architecture of the Gulf. Ukraine is now a defense exporter of strategic significance to the Middle East. South Korea has proven its weapons in live combat conditions. Saudi Arabia is entering the fifth-generation air power era. And the United States defense partnership with the Gulf has deepened in ways that will outlast the current crisis by decades. The war in the Strait of Hormuz is not over, but the side that prepared the longest for it may not be the one that is winning.